Hey everybody, my name is Ron, and I am a grateful recovering alcoholic. Welcome to my YouTube channel called Disappointing Your Demons. It's a new channel. Point of this is to get my story out there, um, to give others the message that there is a way out. I'm going to be telling my story from start to finish, about why I am the way that I am, things that have happened in my life, and to hopefully reach somebody who might be struggling as well, who might relate to my story, and hopefully, maybe save somebody's life. I'm not in this for money or views or in the regards that I'm trying to become YouTube famous or anything like that. I just want to help other people struggling with alcoholism and addiction. Little disclaimer: I am not a therapist. I am not a doctor. I am not a licensed professional. I am a mechanic. Um, so none of this is to be taken as medical advice. It's just my story. And in future episodes, I will be talking about what I do to stay sober and things that have worked for me. I am not going to advocate for any one particular recovery program. Um, I personally do attend Alcoholics Anonymous. Obviously, I'm not very anonymous, but other people are. Um, and I won't be using any names where I have not been given permission. Um, but yeah, so this is going to be my story. Um, so I guess I'll start off with I never set out or intended or wanted to be an alcoholic. I don't think any of us do, alcoholic addict, because I've been told by my sponsor that I should use the addict connotation too, because cocaine was a big part of my story, or other substances. But yeah, I never set out to be an alcoholic. I don't think any of us have. Um, and yeah, so I'll start this off a little lighthearted with a joke. My friend, who is a fairly famous comedian, said one time, and it has stuck with me all these years, that some people drink to unwind, but when I drink, I unravel. And that couldn't be any truer of a statement as far as I'm concerned, and as far as it goes with me. Um, I I was born and raised in Boston. Um, I was the product of rape. My biological mother was raped, and along came me. Shortly thereafter, she put me up for adoption, where I was adopted at 5 months old by my parents. They, the reason I mention that is because it is a very big part and a very important part to my story, which will become apparent in later episodes. But just as far as this episode goes, that's how I came into being. My parents were great. Um, they tried their hardest. My dad was first generation Sicilian over here, and grew up in the North End in the projects, and the projects of Columbia Point. And my mother was originally from Dorchester, which is how I got this ridiculous accent. But my channel, and you just have to deal with it. Um, we lived with my nana. We were fairly poor growing up. I was fairly well. We were fairly poor. Um, not destitute, but government cheese and government blankets were a common thing in my house. But the town that I grew up in, Milton, was a really nice town. I was kind of the wrong side of the tracks kid, um, but it was a nice town, and they provided for me as best as they could with what they had. And if it wasn't for my nana, I don't know what we would have done, but we survived and we lived. My parents were fairly strict growing up. Corporal punishment was a thing in my house, as it was in most people's houses in those days. I'm 47 years old, by the way. Um, the I was always kind of rambunctious. I was always defiant. So I would screw up a lot, and my dad had absolutely no problems giving me a beating. My mom the same. It wasn't like my dad would come home from work all pissed off and just start swinging from for the bleachers. It was, when I would get in trouble. But always defiant right off the rip, just always defiant. My parents or my Nana would tell me not to go around the corner on my big wheel. And what was the first thing I did when I thought they weren't looking? Go around the corner with my big wheel. And my Nana would come charging out of the house with her yardstick, wheeling that thing like a samurai, and, have me in one hand with the big wheel and myself, and then whacking me in the butt with the yardstick with the other. My dad never used like a belter or anything like that. He just always, with his fists in his hands and whatever. My mother, she had a wooden spoon that she liked to use, and one time she thumped me on the head with a meat tenderizer, but that was because I called her a bitch. Don't call Ma a bitch. Anyways, I grew up in a town, like I said, Milton. It was predominantly Irish Catholic at one point in time. It had the highest per capita Irish Catholic population in the country, with some Italians and some Jewish. African Americans was, there weren't too many when I was in elementary school, at least in the first couple of grades. And I'm off-white. I'm Cherokee Indian by birth. I got some slanty eyes, and so already in that town, I was bullied. Called a lot of racial slurs like chink and gook, and because nobody knew what I was, they just knew that I looked different from them. And then at one point, a friend of mine took advantage of me. I don't want to say I was molested, but my therapist says that it was molestation. It doesn't matter, but whatever. I call it I was taken advantage of. And he told everybody what I did. And so the bullying really, really took off, and it was merciless. So now, on top of being called all those other things, now I'm a fag. Now I'm, a homo, whatever you want to call it. I don't use those terms myself personally. To bring anybody else down, but that's what I was called. And bullying, psychologically, physically, it was an everyday thing for me, and so quickly started to withdraw. Never comfortable in my own skin. Angry all the time, and just not having a good go of it. But and then, people that were supposed to protect me, when they found out about it, blamed me for it. And I was the problem. I should have done something. I shouldn't have done this, whatever the case may be. And that made things in my head 10 times worse. But, even with all that being said, still had a fairly happy childhood. My parents, even though they were, broke as a joke, my parents, they did the best they could for me. They always made sure I had everything that I needed within their means. And, my dad was the type of father that if I showed interest in something, he went all for it. Like if I liked Star Wars and Transformers, he made sure I had every Star Wars and Transformers toy that there was. I showed interest in dinosaurs. He got me a whole library's worth of dinosaur books and dinosaur toys and stuff like that. I said one point in my life that I wanted to play soccer, so he started a soccer team, and I don't think that guy ever played soccer in his life, but he tried, and he coached us, and I wanted to be I said I had interest in the Boy Scouts. He started a Boy Scout troop. So it's kind of a duality. My father, just picture Joe Pesci from all those movies, like the gangster movies, and that's pretty much what my father was, minus all the murdering. And then at about 6, 7 years old, I met my best friend to this day, Dan, and um, he he's like a brother to me. And his father. So when all of us kids got out of school, the parents would take turns, watching the kids after school so they could all work. And his father, though, I idolized that guy. His father's name was Tom, and he was my idol. I, you know, just can't say enough good things about that guy. But he was an auto mechanic, and he's the one that got me interested in being an auto tech. And I knew from a fairly early age that that's what I wanted to do was be a mechanic. Um, my father, my parents never really drank. I can count on one hand how many times I saw my father drunk. I can count on one hand how many times I saw my mother drunk. My mother even hid the fact that she smoked cigarettes from me until I was 18. So I didn't have any of that growing up, but Tom drank, and, back in those days, it wasn't uncommon for him to pick us up from like karate or soccer or something and have a six pack in between the front seats. And um, so that was probably uh, the only time I was exposed to drinking was around him, and certainly not blaming him for how I turned out, because I really think that I was born an alcoholic. I just didn't realize it at that time yet. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I always liked the smell of alcohol. And I remember at a Thanksgiving dinner one time, I was 8 years old, and my mom's sitting next to me, and she's having a glass of wine, and I smelled it, and I was like, "Oh, that smells delicious." And I begged her for a sip, and she wouldn't give me a sip. Wouldn't give me a sip. Finally, I'm pretty persistent. She finally relented and gave me a sip. And I remember I didn't. If I'm being honest, I kind of liked the taste, but I just remember that burn, that warmth going down into my throat and into my stomach, and thinking, "Oh, that's wonderful." But I didn't, obviously, at 8 years old, really start drinking. But I hit 13 years old, and that's when everything took off. So I, probably, like I said, about 12 years old, I decided that I wanted to be a mechanic. And I wasn't, very well behaved in school. I didn't like school. I ended up going to this high school called Blue Hills Regional. It was a tech school. Um, but anyway, and I knew back in the day, like, you could drink at work, well, in most shops. And so that was a thing that kind of interested me in becoming a mechanic as well. But at 13 years old, I was over a friend's house, and his older brother and his buddies came over, and they had a case of beer, and we were all down in the basement, and they started playing quarters, and they thought it'd be funny to get me and my friend drunk. And so they asked if we want to play quarters, and of course I want to be cool like the older kids, and sat down, started playing quarters. And I don't know how many beers it took me. I think it was only like two, but that was my first drunk, and I fell in love with alcohol in that moment. It did everything that it was supposed to do for me. Made me feel confident, made me feel comfortable in my own skin, made me feel like I was goddamn bulletproof. And I didn't know it at the time, but after that first drunk, alcohol really dictated everything that I was going to do from that point on. It all revolved around alcohol. What I did for a career, who I hung out with for friends, what I spent my money on. I started doing everything bad at 13. I don't want to say bad, but 13 years old, lost my virginity. 13 years old, started drinking. 13 years old, started smoking weed. 13 years old, tried acid. And I quickly became the person that, if you could smoke it, drink it, snort it or eat it. I was going to do it, and I was going to do more of it than you, and I was going to prove it. And of course, at 13 years old, you can't do it every day. You know, you got, especially with my parents, you get them watching over you like a hawk. But then, you know, started to become known as the kid that, like, wow, like, you know, he drinks a lot. Like when he goes hard, and everybody thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. I was a kid. I was a teenager. You know, it's kind of was a rite of passage in Milton. You know, you go to the quarries and go to a keg party, or you go to your friend's house who has the cool parents, and they let you drink in the basement as long as you don't go anywhere. Things like that. But it dictated what I did, and I just ran with it. And so that kind of progressed and progressed and progressed until I think it was about 16 years old, and my buddy Dan got a drum kit, and I got a bass guitar. And boy, did things really start to take off from there as far as drinking and drugging goes, because now I have the stereotypical life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. At that time too, I started to become a salesman of some things that aren't exactly legal. And so I'm making money working as a mechanic. I'm making money doing that. And I have all this disposable income because I still live with my parents. I'm still a teenager. And, you know, get a car, get, you know, the freaking system in it with the kicker box and the amp and everything. And I'm living large. And get involved in the Boston music scene. And it just started spiraling, like going full tilt on the weekends. And I don't know how I managed to graduate high school. I feel like I'm a fairly intelligent person, but yeah, I don't know how I managed to graduate high school, but I did. And then after I graduated high school, of course, now I'm free. I'm free from that. All I got to do is work, and at work, even though I'm 18 years old, I I can drink at work. You know, I find the shops that I can work at that we're allowed to have beers at lunch, and you know, find the shop that at 11 o'clock in the morning the owner taps the keg, and you know, you just have to have your little red Solo cup, and you can have a beer as you're twisting wrenches. That gradually, you know, those shops, you know, that eventually slowed down and stopped as, you know, people got smarter, I guess, and time went on. But at that time, it was still a thing. But then I got the brilliant idea that, hey, I'll become a bartender. So I get my bartender's license. And I'll give you a brief rundown of what my day was like after that happened. Is that I would get up in the morning. I would go to work. I'd have to be to work at 7:30, all hungover from the night before. And I would get to work, and I would blast some lines off of my dash so I could wake up, and I'd work all day. And then I'd go out to the bar. You know, of course, I'd drink behind the bar, or if my band was, you know, playing a show or something, do that. Drink behind the bar. Then after my shift got over, then me and the wait staff, we'd all party, or if it was a show, you know, party afterwards. And I can remember times to get off and, you know, rail coke off of some girl's tits and something like that. But then I'd go until about 5 in the morning. I have to be to work at 7:30, so I'd go home, get maybe an hour and a half sleep, and rinse and repeat. And that was my life for a while. Then I met my biological mom at 21, and this is an important part of the story. 21 years old, my biological mom gets a hold of me, and I had been told all my life that she had passed away in a car accident. That's why that's why I was put up for adoption. But the truth comes out, and I talk to her and have a brief relationship with her. And I have a biological brother and a biological sister, half siblings. And She tells me that the reason that I was put up for adoption was actually that she was raped. And I mean, I don't blame her. But that did a number on me. And my drinking and drugging really took off. But in meeting them, because I always wondered why I was like kind of like crazy and like an addict, alcoholic. Everybody in that family, excluding my biological sister, every single person in that family that I met was an addict or alcoholic or both. And it just dawned on me, like, I always heard that genetics play a part in it. Well, sure it does, apparently, because I really, again, feel like I was born with this, I guess, for lack of a better term, they call it a disease of addiction. But that didn't stop me. That didn't do anything for me. And at this point in time, I'm about 21 years old, maybe 22, and my Nana, who was my best friend, passed away. And at the same time, my dad had heart valve replacement, and he almost died. And he ended up in a coma, ended up having a stroke while he was in the coma after the surgery. But anyways, my Nana died. And after all this is going on, my mom is basically, I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, really, because it's understandable, but she is fairly useless because she just had so much trauma going on, as did I, but I had to be the man of the family. So I took care of all the funeral arrangements for her, meanwhile trying to go in and see my dad in the hospital. And it was just such a stressful time and drank my feelings away more and more. Some days just too hungover to go to work. And it was a mess. And then after that, my dad got transferred to a rehab hospital. And I went to go see him. And now, to know my dad before and after this, it was like night and day. I remember going in to see my dad, and he was just newly out of his coma, just newly in this rehab hospital because his whole left side didn't work because of the stroke that he had when he was under. And I go in and I see him and I go, "Hi, Dad." And he looks at me and he goes, and he had a funny way of talking, but he goes, "Ronnie." He goes, "Hey, Ron." He goes, "The animal guy was here. The animal guy was here." He goes, "He had a little bunny and I was petting the bunny and oh, it was so cool." And he's going on and on about this. And I almost started crying because I'm like, "Dad?" Like, my dad would never have been like that. He was a hard ass. He was tough. He was like a god to me. And from that day forward, my dad was forever changed. He was gentle. He was nice. He never raised his voice to me hardly. Never once raised a hand to me after that ever again. And later on in my story, I'll tell you why I think that this is God's way of, God has a plan, hindsight being 2020. That there was a reason that happened, even though I couldn't see it at the time. But anyway, my drinking and drugging like really took off from there even more. It doesn't sound like it can get any more, but it did. And pretty soon I'm certainly drinking every day. Certainly using cocaine very frequently, smoking pot like it's going out of style. Man, just how I was living, and I did live by this, the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll, like I said, but, chicks dig scars and glory lasts forever. Die young and leave a good-looking corpse. That's literally how I was living. I was trying to not make it past 25. That was like literally a goal that I had set for myself. Like, I think 25 is a good age. So I started working at one point, I started working at my buddy's shop. He was also the drummer in the band that I was in, but I started working at his shop. His mother owned it. And I meet this woman, Nettie. And she, little did I know at the time, but she was going to be my future ex-wife. And we're dating. She had just gotten out of a relationship, and I really feel like I was her rebound. I'm living the way that I'm living and not really looking for my forever or anything like that. And, not to be crude or crass, but she tells me that she can't have children. And I'm thinking, jackpot, because, condoms suck. Well, it turns out she can get pregnant. Not only can she get pregnant, she can get wicked pregnant. And a few months after starting to see her, date her, she asked me to come out and pump her gas for her. And I'm like, at work, because it's a gas station that they own, gas station shop. And I'm like, you can pump your own fucking gas. Like, what's the matter with you? And she's like, no, you need to come pump my gas for me. Like, fine, fuck it, whatever. It's not the hill I'm going to die on. So I go out and pumping her gas, and she's standing like 10 feet away. I'm like, what are you doing over there? Like, it's not going to explode. And so I get done pumping her gas, and I put everything away. And she says, so I got something to tell you. And I was like, what? And she just comes right out and says it. She goes, I'm pregnant. You're going to be a father. For a brief second, I was like, fuck. But then, I don't know, something clicked with me, and I'm happy. I'm thrilled. I'm happy. I'm like, thinking, wow, this is going to be great. I'm going to be a father. I start jumping up and down for joy, and I give her a great big hug. I'm like, wow, that's really great news. And in my head, first thought is, well, party's over. Second thought is, hope they don't fucking turn out like me. And that was the real deal. Like, that was the thought. I hope they don't turn out like me. So I stopped doing everything other than drinking. I stopped doing coke. I stopped, playing in bands. I stopped doing everything and stopped focusing on the fact that I'm going to bring this little life, a new life into the world that I'm going to have to be responsible for. And I'm going to be a good dad. But I hope they don't turn out like me. But the problem with all that is, and I'm going to end this video here, the problem with all that is that when you take away all the other stuff that you use to not feel, you got to fill it with something. And alcohol really filled that void. So I guess that's it for today. I'm going to make more episodes. I don't know how many episodes it's going to be to hash out my story. Probably another 3 or so. But now I got to do the whole, please hit the like and subscribe button, blah, blah, blah. I really want you to come back. And if any part of my story resonated with you, please leave it in the comments below. I again, don't advocate for AA. I don't advocate for any one recovery program, but if you're out there and you're sick and you're suffering and you're struggling, do yourself a favor, just don't drink. Ask for help. A lot of people think that asking for help is a weakness. Couldn't be any more wrong. It is a strength. It is so strong to reach out and admit that you have a problem and want to do something about it. Anyways, that's all I got for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I'll see you in the next video.